this past week, the announcement was made for the Whiteout game, and essentially it came down to Minnesota at night or Ohio State at noon. Thank you very much, Fox, for putting your big game on at noon. But the reason for bringing you in, Nate, is everyone wants to know, is there really an advantage for Penn State in a whiteout game? You dug deeper into this and looked at some of the other statistics to find out if there's any correlation with whiteout and how the team performs. And you did this starting with the defense. How did the defense perform in whiteout games versus other games?
Yep. So, well, we do it again as how many points the defense allowed versus how the scoring of the opponent's offense normally. And with every game, all of those 16 games with one exception, which was 2013 Michigan, which was the triple overtime or quadruple overtime game, the Penn State defense holds the opponent's offense to, on average, about 10 points fewer than what they would expect to gain against any other opponent. So, you know, the Penn State defenses are always good, and they are always going to put up a very strong fight against the opponent offenses. And again, when you're playing Michigan, when you're playing Ohio State, when you're playing Alabama, those are high-powered offenses that are very difficult to stop. But the Penn State D always comes to play here.
So the Penn State defense outperforms, makes it appear that the opponent is underperforming offensively compared to the rest of their games during the season.
Yep.
How about if we flip it around and look at Penn State's offense and try to do it the same way? How does Penn State's offense perform against the opponent's defense versus how that unit performs against teams other than Penn State?
So, well, maybe not surprisingly, but similarly, right, the Penn State offense actually gets held to lower than what they would normally expect in their seasonal average against the opposing defenses. And only 5 times have they scored more than their season average in the whiteout. So, you know, if just for point of reference, right, if Penn State's averaging 28 points a game in the whiteout, they're usually going to be slightly below that.
But there's another way to measure it. Instead of just measuring Penn State's offense against itself normally, you could measure how many points does Penn State score against that opponent versus how that opponent defense did against other teams.
Yep.
So in that way, the Penn State team, how did they do in that capacity?
Right. So in that case, they are far better at outscoring the opponent's averages, or outscoring what the opponent would normally disallow. So only 3 times have they scored less than what the opponent would disallow, and every other time they outscored it, with the biggest one being that 2017 Michigan game where they scored 23 points more than Michigan was allowing for the season.
As you could probably tell from the conversation so far, this could get very confusing in how you analyze these statistics, you know, the old lies, damn lies, and statistics. So you need to dig a little deeper and maybe figure out what are the best ways to measure the effect of a whiteout game and a whiteout crowd. I thought an interesting aspect that you had in here was the number of penalties. And I don't think number of yards is all that relevant because that's the bigger penalties, the pass interference and so on. But the whiteout atmosphere creates those smaller penalties, the 5-yard, you know, offsides, or they jump, or they take too long. How did those numbers turn out for the whiteout games?
Very good question. So the opponents are penalized more frequently in the whiteouts than they are in their normal games. And now, again, you know, the whiteouts an away game, you're factoring all their home games as well. But in 9 of 16 whiteouts, the Nittany Lion fans, as much as anything, forced more penalties than their opponents would have expected. And on the flip side of that, Penn State is penalized far less. They get about 3 penalties less per game in the whiteout, give or take, 2 to 3 less in the whiteout than they would against their seasonal average. So, you know, it is an advantage, like you're saying. It's maybe not the huge yardage advantage, but it is an advantage for Penn State. You know, you go back to the 2019 Michigan game where immediately after the kickoff, which was a touchback, Michigan gets a penalty or they had to call timeout because they were going to get a penalty from the crowd noise, right? And that is one of the big factors, I think, in the whiteout that keeps them in the game, even when, they might be overmatched and a big underdog against a team like Ohio State.
Let's get, Nate, to what really counts, though. Let's talk about against the spread. Those of us who are known to put a little wager on certain ball games, occasionally, want to know, what effect does the whiteout have with the spread?
Yeah. So let's just start with first, how to show the opponent that is coming into Beaver Stadium to face the whiteout. Penn State has been an underdog or a flat line 11 of the 16 whiteouts previous to last year. So, they're absolutely playing at the top tier team on their schedule, right? The biggest underdog that they were was in 2016, coincidentally, right? When they beat Ohio State, they were nearly a 20-point dog, 19.5-point dog. They're big underdogs, but they tend to do better than average, right? So if you just, for the last 17 years, bet Penn State against the spread in the whiteout, you're going to be coming out on top in money, right? Where, I don't know what their overall record against the spread is over the last 16 years, but I bet it's not better than that, right?
Although in the year when they went 2-2 through their first 4 games, remember the 5th game they beat Minnesota in overtime and won 9 games in a row?
Yeah.
They were 9-0 against the spread in that streak.
Yeah. And that's fantastic.
So I've heard.
Yeah.
I've heard. If someone kind of got on that train, they did well. Let's talk about, though, even against the spread, how much do you think Vegas is now saying, hey, wait a minute, the whiteout means something? So instead of giving what we always hear, the 3 points to Penn State for the home field, we'll give them 6 or 7 points.
That's actually a very good question, right? Because there are, let's see, we have 4 lines or 4 outcomes that were within 2 points of the line, right? So that indicates to me that, Vegas is kind of adapting to this a little bit, right? And they are hitting the line nearly spot on in a lot of these games. Now, you do have the outlier, again, like 2016, where Penn State beat the line by 22.5 points. In 2017, they beat the line by 19.5 points. But there are many, many close games in the whiteouts against the spread. So, is Vegas giving them more? Potentially, yeah. And it's warranted, right? I mean, again, they do better. They're 9-7, I believe now 10-7 against the spread in the whiteout. So they've earned a little bit of that right.